Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our quarterly housing market conditions update. I'm Jean Lynn Powell, the General Deputy for HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. And it's great to see all of you today, especially on a Friday afternoon. And we had a few technical difficulties with the external feed, so that's why we're slightly delayed. But thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us today. And also to the folks that are viewing this on webcast, thank you for joining us. We have a terrific lineup today, and starting with our Chief Market Analyst, Kevin Kane. He'll give us an overview of how the housing markets are doing in the first quarter. And he'll also share with us some of the new things that we're doing in transforming the U.S. Housing Market Conditions Report from a paper-based product to an innovative web-based tool. And we have a wonderful panel discussion lined up. As we've done in the past, we've tied an upcoming Evidence Matters edition to our panel discussion for these quarterlies. And of course, we're going to be talking about preserving affordable housing. And this week's been an important week with Harvard's Joint Center on Housing Studies releasing their annual report on the state of the nation's housing. And you'll find findings consistent with what we've reported in PD&R's Worst Case Housing Needs Report. And I'll put in a plug. You can find the executive summary on huduser.org. But basically, Harvard's study found that there's a sharp rise in the number of renter households that are paying more than 50% of their income on housing. The report also states that between 2007 and 2011, the number of rental units affordable to extremely low-income households fell to 6.8 million from 6.9 million, which doubles the gap between the number who need low-income housing and the supply of such housing. So this makes it even more important in terms of affordable housing preservation. The report also projects some interesting trends. It projects the majority of potential households becoming first-time homeowners will be predominantly minority, and that has implications for wealth accumulation and, of course, the rental supply. And then more members of the groups that have traditionally been homeowners are now becoming renters. So these trends show that preserving affordable housing is even more critical now more than ever. And we're pleased to have a panel of experts today, policy and research experts from the field join us. And we're delighted to have Margaret Salazar be our moderator. Margaret is our acting director and associate deputy assistant secretary for affordable housing preservation here at HUD. She oversees programs to recapitalize and preserve affordable rental housing and advance energy efficiency of multifamily properties. She first joined HUD in the San Francisco multifamily hub, and she served chief of insured production and oversaw the development, refinance, and substantial rehab of hundreds of multifamily homes with FHA insurance. And she started her career as a presidential management fellow, and she cut her teeth on housing policy and local issues in the Northern California area. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of the panelists, but we're gonna start off with Kevin Kane's quarterly update. So Kevin, I'll invite you to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jean. Jean had mentioned the technical difficulties. I believe they were trying to figure out a way to reduce the glare coming on the screen, but unfortunately, I don't think we've figured that out yet, as the folks on the webcast can probably tell you. So my task here this afternoon is to keep everybody energized and excited for the panel, and I could find no better way I could think of to do that than to talk about housing and economic statistics. So that's what I'm going to do for the next 10 minutes here. So before I begin, I'd like to thank our field economists who helped me put together the maps that you'll see in my presentation. Those folks are David Bank, Ben Hoke, Wendy Ip, T. Michael Miller, and Holly Weaver. And that team is led by Randall Goodnight. Just a note about the maps, the color themes of the maps are all the same, where brown indicates worse off conditions or declines in a variable, and blue indicates better conditions or increases. So before we start talking about the housing markets, let's take a brief look at the nation's economy. This first figure shows the year-over-year percentage change in non-farm payrolls since 2003. And this is looking at both the 12-month and the 3-month averages through March of 2013. Non-farm payrolls are a measure of the number of jobs in the economy. The 12-month average, which is shown in blue, shows an annual change and is a more stable measure of economic performance. The 3-month average change, which is shown in red, is a good indicator for where things are heading. During the 12 months ending March 2013, non-farm payrolls averaged nearly 134.3 million jobs. This was up 1.6%, or 2.2 million jobs, compared with a year ago. The 3-month average was also up by 1.6% from a year ago. The rates for both of these series have been relatively stable since June of 2012, and you can see that with the flattening of the curves off on the right side. For the 8th consecutive quarter, every region in the country added jobs relative to a year ago. So the entire country is shown in blue, indicating job growth. 5 regions grew at a rate that was faster than or equal to the national average, with 3 of those regions growing by more than 2%, shown in dark blue. Growth was led by the Rocky Mountain region at 2.8%, where year-over-year growth was up 0.5 percentage points compared with last quarter. The 5 regions in light blue grew at a rate that was slower than the national average, with the slowest rate of growth in the Mid-Atlantic at 0.7%. Now let's take a closer look at the Pacific region by metropolitan area. Year-over-year growth in this region was 2.1%, and that was led by a 6.9% increase in the construction subsector. This was related to increased single-family home production in all 4 states. Those areas in the darkest blue percent, and that includes the major metro areas of Phoenix, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. The highest rate of growth occurred in Santa Cruz, which was up by 6.2%. The national unemployment rate was 8.1% during the first quarter. This was down from 8.7% a year ago. The 5 regions in blue had a rate that was less than the national rate, and this was led by the Great Plains at 6.2%. The 5 regions in brown had a rate that was higher than the national average, led by the Pacific at 9.5%. On a state level, North Dakota still has the lowest rate in the nation at 4%, and Nevada and Illinois both have the highest rates at 10%. What about the change in the unemployment rate from a year ago? On a national level, the unemployment rate during the first quarter of 2013 was down 0.6 percentage points from last year. The 4 regions in dark blue declined at a rate that was greater than the national decline. The largest decline occurred in the Pacific at 1.4 percentage points, with the rate falling from 10.9% to 9.5%. And this was led by a 2.1 percentage point decline in Nevada. The unemployment rate declined or remained unchanged in every region of the country. Now let me give a quick overview of current market conditions. Sales market conditions continue to improve throughout much of the country, and they have become balanced in many regions. As a bit of background, balanced conditions exist when the quantity of housing supplied equals the quantity demanded. Soft markets occur when the quantity of housing supplied exceeds the quantity demanded, and we have a housing surplus. And tight markets occur when demand exceeds supply and we have a housing shortage. All 3 home price indices show that home sales prices increased during the first quarter of 2013 relative to a year ago, with the largest gains that we've seen in years. Existing home sales increased by 8.1% during the 12 months ending March 2013 compared with a year ago. Inventories of new homes for sale were up 6% from a year ago, and they were down 10% for existing homes. Based on the current rate of home sales, there's a 4.4 months supply of new homes, and that's compared with a 4.9 months supply a year ago. And there's a 4.7 months supply of existing homes, which is down from a 6.2 months supply a year ago. The sales vacancy rate was 2.1% in the first quarter, down slightly from 2.2% a year ago. Rental market conditions are balanced to tight throughout much of the country, and they continue to tighten in most markets. An estimated 65% of new apartments that were completed in the fourth quarter of 2012 were absorbed within 3 months. This compares with a 55% rate of absorption a year ago. And multifamily production increased by 17% in the first quarter relative to a year ago. Now let's take a look at regional conditions around the country. These are assessments that are provided by our field economists. Relative to last quarter, improvements in an area are shaded in blue, and declines in conditions are shaded in brown. On the sales side, conditions continue to improve in much of the country, and they are considered balanced in half the regions, with New England and the Rocky Mountains both moving into the balanced category. Conditions also improved in New York, New Jersey, and in the Northwest. Conditions are only considered soft in the Southeast, and they're slightly soft in the Mid-Atlantic. On the rental side, market conditions continue to tighten around the country and are considered tight in New England, New York, New Jersey, where things were previously mixed, and in the Northwest. And they are a mixture of balanced to tight in many other regions. In the Midwest, previously tight conditions improved slightly to balanced to tight, while in the Southwest, balanced conditions have become a mix of balanced to tight. Let's take a look at those price indices. For the fourth consecutive quarter, all 3 indices show price increases relative to a year ago, and the rate of growth continues to go up. The Case-Shiller Index, shown here in blue, was up 10.2%. The FHFA Index, which is shown in red, was up 6.7%, and the CoreLogic Index, shown here in black, was up 9.8%. In comparison, to put this in context, in the first quarter of 2012, 2 of these 3 indices were still declining. This next map shows the change in the CoreLogic Index by region from the first quarter of 2012 to the first quarter of 2013. This is not seasonally adjusted data, and it does include distressed sales. Nationally, the increase was 9.8%, with prices up in every single region. The West Coast, shown in dark blue, was up by double digits, with a gain of 16.9% in the Pacific region, followed by 10.6% in the Northwest. The Rocky Mountains, Southeast, and Southwest regions increased between 5 and 10%, shown in the medium shades of blue. The rest of the nation increased by less than 5%. There were 8 states that had double-digit price increases, led by Nevada, which was up by 20%, and Arizona, which was up by 18%. Prices were down in only 3 states, led by a 4% decline in Delaware. According to the Census Bureau, the median price of a new home in the first quarter of 2013 was $251,000. This was up 5% from a year ago. And according to the National Association of Realtors, the median price for an existing home was $176,000. This was up 11% from a year ago. This next map shows the price changes in the Southeast region at the metropolitan level during the first quarter. Prices were up in every metropolitan area in Florida, including 3 areas that were up by more than 10%, shown in dark blue. This resulted in an 8% increase for the state altogether. In Alabama, prices were down nearly 2%, with declines in nearly every metro area in the state, and you can see that most of those metro areas then are in brown. The foreclosure situation continues to improve. This next map here shows the percent of home loans 90 or more days delinquent in foreclosure or an REO as of March 2013. REO stands for real estate owned, which means that the lender now owns the property. The national average was 7% of all loans in those 3 categories. This was down from 7.8% a year ago. The 4 regions in brown have a rate that's higher than the national average, while the other 6 regions are below the national average. The rate declined in 7 regions, with the most dramatic change in the Pacific region, which was down by 2.4 percentage points. New York, New Jersey, and New England were both up by less than 1 percentage point. and the rate remained unchanged in the Mid-Atlantic. Arizona, Nevada, California, and Florida led the declines in the nation, and those were all down by more than 2 percentage points. New Jersey, on the other hand, was up by 1.2 percentage points. So let's take a closer look at Region 2. Those areas in the 2 shades of brown have a rate that's higher than the national average. 10 metropolitan areas in the region have a rate that's more than 10%. Those are shown in dark brown. The percentage of distressed loans increased in every metropolitan area in Region 2 during the past year, with the largest increase of 2.6 percentage points in Vineland, New Jersey. And let's take a look at sales now. Existing home sales increased by 8.1% during the 12 months ending March 2013 compared with a year ago. Sales increased in every region, with double-digit increases in New England, the Midwest, the Rocky Mountains, and the Northwest. The regions in dark blue increased at a rate that was faster than the national average, while the light blue grew slower than the national average. And just to note something not shown on the map, new home sales were up 20% in the first quarter of 2013 relative to a year ago, and that's according to data from the Census Bureau. Looking closer here at the New York, New Jersey region, which had the smallest increase, that area was up by 2.9%. Sales were up in 13 metropolitan areas, shown in the 2 shades of blue, and they were down in the other 7 areas, shown in brown. Camden led growth, and that was up by 11%, with Rochester and Ocean City also increasing by more than the national average. Declines ranged from 1% in Utica to 19% in Buffalo. Single-family home building, as measured by building permits issued, increased by 27% across the country during the first quarter relative to a year ago. Single-family home building increased in every region of the country, with gains ranging from 11% in New England to almost 47% in the Pacific. So that explains that increase that we had in the construction subsector. The number of multifamily units permitted was up by 17% in the first quarter of 2013, and increases occurred in 8 regions, and they ranged from 11% in the Southeast to 66% in the Northwest. Multifamily permits remained unchanged in the Pacific region relative to a year ago, and they declined by 6% in the Mid-Atlantic. And now let's take a look at rental market conditions. Vacancy rates continue to decline throughout much of the country, and those are shown in the 3 shades of the brown dots. According to REAC data, which covers 200 market areas, vacancy rates were down in 151 market areas. They were up in 37 areas and unchanged in 12 areas. The average U.S. vacancy rate declined by 0.7 percentage points from 5% in the first quarter 2012 to 4.3% in the first quarter of 2013. There were 8 markets with a decline of 2 percentage points or more, and those are shown in dark brown. And if you'll look, 5 of those are in Florida. The light brown areas declined by less than the national decline. According to the Census Bureau for the entire U.S., the rental vacancy rate was 8.6% in the first quarter of 2013, down from 8.8%. And now a closer look at the Southeast region vacancy rates. Vacancy rates were down in 38 of the 48 areas, and those are shown in brown. They were down in all the markets in Florida, and again, 5 of those down by 2 percentage points or more, shown in dark brown. The rates were up in 8 areas, although only 2 of those increases were by more than 1%. Rates remained unchanged in the other 2 areas. And now looking at rents across the country, rents were up by 3% nationally, according to REAC data. The average market rent in the first quarter for the 200 areas was $1,102. This compares with $1,070 a year ago. Rents increased in 196 of the 200 areas. Rents increased by more than 3% in 34 of those areas, and those are shown in dark blue. Areas in light blue increased by less than the national increase, and 4 of those areas in brown had a decline in rents. And let's take a closer look at rents in the Southwest. Rents were up in all 29 metropolitan areas, and 11 of those areas increased by more than the national average, shown in dark blue, and this was led by a whopping 21% gain in Midland, Odessa, which is related to the gas and oil industry exploration going on in that area. So in summary, year-over-year job growth for the first quarter of 2013 was 1.6%. Sales markets continue to improve and are now balanced in many areas around the country. Prices had the most significant increase in years. Sales were up as well. Rental market conditions are balanced throughout the country, and they continue to tighten, with rents continuing to rise and vacancy rates continuing to decline. For additional information, you can talk to me, you can talk to your local regional or field economist, or you can go and check out our new U.S. housing market conditions website. As folks hopefully are aware, we're no longer putting out the printed copies of the U.S. housing market conditions report, but it's now a brand new website for folks to check out. What I've got here on the screen is a snapshot of the landing page for that site, where you can get all of your national, regional, local data, everything that was in the printed copy on the website. It's new and improved, it's better. Any questions folks have about that, feel free to email any of the EMAD staff, myself included. So thank you very much. It's my pleasure at this point to hand things over to Margaret Salazar, who is the Acting Director of the Office of Affordable Housing Preservation here at HUD, who's going to lead our panel discussion this afternoon.
Great, thank you so much, Kevin. Can everyone here in the audience hear me okay? Great, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Thank you again so much, everybody, for joining us today, especially on a Friday afternoon. And I want to also thank our panelists, some of whom who have traveled to be with us today, and we certainly appreciate that and appreciate their time. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the HUD perspective on the issue that we're about to discuss today, which of course is the critical issue of preserving affordable rental housing. Certainly what we just heard tells us that vacancy rates in many parts of the country are going down and rents are going up, which tells us that now more than ever we have a critical need to preserve affordable rental housing. As many of you know, HUD is making a dedicated and concerted effort to come up with new opportunities and flexibilities for the owners, public housing authorities, and other partners that we work with to preserve the long-term affordability and viability of HUD-assisted properties. We're really at a crossroads today, and you'll hear about some of this as we go along on our presentations, but we have aging properties. We also have an aging population that has growing needs. We have changing demographics, including family composition. We also have changing needs in terms of the types of housing that we require. And at the same time, we have growing needs for infrastructures in our cities and communities. Together, it really does pose us with a number of challenges. But what I'm pleased to let you know today is that HUD has enacted a number of new programs and initiatives to help to address those challenges. And it's really a wide array of programs that we wanted to at least give you a little flavor for today. Among the many things that we've been able to put into place in the last few years, we've come up with a streamlined platform for FHA mortgage insurance, which is a really important product for folks that are looking for financing to preserve rental housing. So we've implemented a number of reforms to speed up and improve our delivery of those FHA loan products, and that's having a tremendous impact for folks as an option for financing. We've put in place a number of new notices and administrative reforms to really streamline our approvals on the HUD side for things like mortgage prepayments, deferral of flexible subsidy debt, for owners that want to, for example, combine efficiency units to create bigger units to improve the occupancy of their properties. And also to let Section 8 owners better accommodate low-income housing tax credits, which of course are a key source of equity financing for these rental properties. On the public housing side, as well as multifamily, the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative is a powerful new program that incorporates housing, people, and neighborhood strategies for comprehensive neighborhood transformation. And of course, one of our signature programs as well is the rental assistance demonstration for both public housing and multifamily housing. And you'll hear a lot about that today. We're pleased to share updates on that program. So together, all of these strategies really do pose a number of flexible options for the owners and customers that we serve as practitioners. But what's really exciting, I think, about today's conversation, particularly as a HUD official, is that it really gives us an opportunity to step back from our day-to-day role here at HUD as practitioners, as regulators, and hopefully as really good partners to the industry. But it allows us the opportunity to step back and really learn about some of the cutting-edge strategies that folks are employing in the field to engage players from various arenas to tackle the issue of preservation, and also gives us an opportunity to think about how we can incorporate some of the cutting-edge research out there that folks are using to make decisions about preserving properties, which is so critical and informs the work that we all do. So I'm very pleased to be able to have that conversation with folks today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists, and again, we're very pleased to have them with us today. To my immediate left is Ann Ray from the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse of the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies at the University of Florida. Ann Ray manages the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse, which is an online source of housing supply and demand data for cities and counties in Florida. Since joining the Schimberg Center in 2001, she has also performed research on public housing, the housing needs of persons with disabilities, farm worker housing, and states' implementation of the low-income housing tax credit. Ms. Ray directed the center's activities associated with its grant from the MacArthur Foundation, its Window of Opportunity initiative, under which the center developed data and early warning systems for the analysis of preservation risks to Florida's subsidized housing supply. She received a BA from the University of Michigan and a Master in Urban Planning and Policy from the University of Illinois at Chicago. To Ann's left is Stacy Young. We're very pleased to have Stacy with us today. Stacy's the director of the Preservation Compact, which is a collaborative effort located at Community Investment Corporation to stem the loss of affordable rental housing in Cook County, Illinois. And as director of the Compact, she coordinates policy and programmatic initiatives to further rental preservation that includes energy retrofits, data analysis, and property taxes, and government processes. Prior to her work with the Compact, she worked for the City of Chicago Office of the Mayor as assistant to the mayor for affordability, and at the Chicago Department of Housing as the Director of Policy and Research. So we're very pleased to have Stacy with us today. And then finally, to Stacy's left is Will Levy. Will Levy, we're pleased to have Will as an employee here with us at HUD. He works in the Office of Public and Indian Housing, specializing in HUD's Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD. His responsibilities focus around policy and program development, budget development, and outreach to public housing stakeholders. He's worked with dozens of public housing authorities across the country to use RAD to preserve and transform their public housing stocks, and we're looking forward to hearing an update from Will today on the RAD program. So without further ado, I'd love to hear what Ann can tell us about her work at the Schimberg Center.
Thanks so much, Margaret. And what we saw about the Florida housing markets in Kevin's presentation very much confirms what we're seeing at the state level, which is that rental markets are really tightening up, that we have a real affordable rental housing need, and so preservation becomes even more and more important. As Margaret mentioned, I coordinate the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse. I'm at the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies, which is an affordable housing research center at University of Florida. And we kind of function as the state's affordable housing research arm. We work very closely with Florida Housing Finance Corporation, our state housing finance agency. And as a partner with Florida Housing, we produce the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse, where we have a website that provides information about housing needs, about the housing supply. And one specific aspect of that is our assisted housing inventory, which is a database of affordable rental housing in the state. So the assisted housing, so what I want to do is talk briefly about that database, which is very much forms the basis for some of our work in preservation. Talk about a similar database of formerly assisted properties called the Lost Properties Inventory. And then talk about our affordable housing suitability model, which is a GIS-based model for evaluating locations and sites in terms of their suitability for affordable housing. So the Assisted Housing Inventory, or AHI, that's our preservation database. It consists of roughly 2,300 developments in Florida with a little under 250,000 units. And these are subsidized rental units that have funding from HUD itself, from USDA Rural Development, from Florida Housing Finance Corporation, or bond financing from local housing finance authorities, and in many cases have more than one layer of funding and more than one source. And HUD's really been a key partner in our development of that database. We get an annual data office, have since the early 2000s, and we also make a lot of use of HUD's online multifamily databases to supplement that information. So we put this data online, it's available to the public, and we provide basic property information, so where is the property located, how many units do we have in the property, how many are rent restricted, how many have project-based rental assistance. We provide information about all the different subsidy layers at the property and what their expiration dates are, which is key for forecasting potential losses to the inventory. We look at the target population, is the owner a for-profit or nonprofit. We've added information about tenant-paid rents and what the utility allowances are. And more recently, we've also added information about tenant characteristics at each development, because when we look at this subsidized or assisted rental housing, there's a real range in the tenants they target and in the tenants they attract. We also have on our website similar, if somewhat more limited, information about Florida's public housing stock, which is quite a bit smaller. We've got about 35,000 units statewide. But we provide information about the location of those units, when they were built, and how many units are in each development, what building type there is. And so this assisted housing inventory is used in preservation in a lot of different ways. Our state housing finance agency in particular has used it to define its universe of potential preservation projects. Advocates use it to find information about specific properties in their communities or to get a sense of the assisted housing inventory as a whole. Developers use it either online or we get requests when they're looking at potential properties for preservation. And particularly because our state now has a set aside of tax credits for preservation, it's a tool for identifying the properties that may be eligible for that kind of funding. So as I said, we started collecting this information in the early 2000s, launched the online application, which we update every year in 2004. And shortly after that, we started also using it as a tool to track what we've lost in the state, because we have units coming into the inventory, but we also have units leaving this assisted housing inventory. And so our LPI, or lost properties inventory, is like a mirror image of the assisted housing inventory. They're properties that had, at one point, since 1993, funding from HUD, from RD, from our state, or from local housing finance authorities, but have since exited those subsidy restrictions. And it's a substantial amount. It's about 600 developments with over 52,000 affordable units. And so we also put that information online. It's been an advocacy tool that has allowed people to look at the net gains and losses to our stock over time. And in some recent years, we've taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back in our inventory. In other slow years, we've actually lost more than we've gained. And we're also using it as a research tool, both to look at how the inventory has changed and what we've lost when. And then we do an annual survey of, we look at the current status of properties that had been subsidized. Have they remained as rental housing? Have they changed to condos? Have they been demolished? And if they stayed as rental, are they still offering affordable rents? So I'll talk very briefly about some of the results of these things. So as I mentioned, we use the lost properties inventory to track our property losses over time. And while the loss to the assisted housing inventory started to get a lot of attention, and preservation risk started to get a lot of attention in the 1990s, with the beginning of prepayment of HUD subsidized mortgages and opt-outs of Section 8 contracts. Some of that certainly did happen in Florida during that time, but where we really start to lose properties is in the early 2000s. And that's with the expiration of the 15-year tax credit developments that have been built, 87, 88, 89, and also with the beginning of maturing of mortgage revenue bonds. And so we get this spike in our loss of properties. And for the most part, that spike hasn't gone away, but it's changed in character over time. After that, we saw a lot of condo conversion, which was just a huge boom, both in the subsidized and in the private market stock in the mid-2000s. Following that, we continue to see losses, not because of condo conversion, but because of foreclosure, because of vacancy, deteriorating conditions in some older properties. And then more recently, we're continuing to see that. and some significant foreclosures and property losses because of that. And we're also seeing the maturing of some of the last insured mortgages, so the last 236 projects, some of the rural development projects. And so while we want to look into this, and it appears that in 2012, actually, we experienced quite a bit of loss of our subsidized housing stock. Some of that deeply subsidized, the project-based ones with project-based rental assistance. Some that are tax credit properties, and then some the bond finance properties that have some pretty modest income restrictions. Maybe they're required to keep 20% of their units at 80% of area median income or less. So as I mentioned, we've done some follow-up to see what's happened to these properties to help us think about what we need to prioritize for preservation. In our surveys, we found that most developments do continue on as rental housing. As I said, there was a brief spike for a couple years in conversion to condos, so about 20%, in our survey we found about 20% of the units were condo conversions. And of the remaining ones, most are vacant or demolished because of poor property conditions. And then following up on the rentals that stayed affordable, that stayed in the rental inventory, most of them are affordable to some degree. Most of them are affordable to households at 60% of area median income. Nearly all of them are affordable to households at 80% of area median income, but none of them are affordable to extremely low-income households. None of them provide units that are affordable to households at 30% of area median income or less. And that's to be expected. I mean, the market simply does not do that. But what that means is, though, although the loss to the project-based rental assistance in the HUD and RD subsidized inventory might not be the biggest losses we're facing, they're the deepest losses we're facing. And it's the ones where we know these units are not going to be affordable to the types of tenants that were renting them before. We also asked the properties if they accept Section 8 vouchers. And what we found is the majority actually do not. Again, particularly the ones that had the relatively light income restrictions before, the majority of those do not accept Section 8. Most of the former project-based rental assistance and tax credit developments do, but not all of them. So between the loss to the inventory from condo conversion, vacancy, and demolition, and the loss of properties that would accept voucher holders, and I can think of one, for instance, that was a Section 8 development, very specifically excluding Section 8 voucher holders under a new owner and a more upscale housing development in downtown. So there's a loss there too, and it's a loss we need to be aware of. I would say, as I mentioned before, one thing that the lost properties inventory has taught us is that these preservation crises or events come in waves. And one thing that, while we've been focused on early warning systems, one thing that makes it really challenging to develop an early warning system is looking at property losses in 2002. Conditions were different. We were losing a lot of tax credit properties. That's not really happening right now. So we have to be very aware of what current conditions are that may push properties out of the market. And the next one we see coming in the early 2020s is the loss of the 30-year tax credit properties. It sounded like it was a long way before, but it's actually not that far away now. And in fact, Florida, in 5 years, there will be 9,000 units that are exiting tax credit restrictions. And so we have because we have this database, we have some time to start thinking now, what are we going to do when those properties start hitting year 30? Another thing we learned is that when we started working and thinking about risk assessment and early warning systems, a lot of times we heard, don't worry about the nonprofit-owned properties, don't worry about the ones that serve elderly households, people with disabilities, those organizations are mission-driven, they're not going to leave. And while the majority of properties in our lost properties inventory are for-profit-owned family properties, there are definitely a strong minority that are owned by nonprofits, that serve elderly tenants or people with disabilities. And they leave for the same reason that the for-profit stock leaves. They leave because they're deteriorating, they're leaving because the organization is moving on to other types of projects, they're leaving maybe because of some kind of conflict with their funder. And so while we may want to keep our eye on the less mission-driven organizations, we can't just assume that all the other ones are going to be okay. And finally, we've learned that property loss and preservation are not all or nothing phenomena. In some cases, properties have remained affordable to the folks they were serving before. And so the loss of subsidies and income and rent restrictions aren't an automatic loss to the inventory, although they can be. And we've also seen a lot of what I think of as preservation light. That's not an official preservation process, but maybe it's a property that is staying in the inventory that's received an energy retrofit, and so their costs are going down. Some places, the properties are not officially subsidized anymore, but the local government is using NSP money or is using its own resources to provide some measure of affordability, some measure of rehab. So while it drops off our assisted housing inventory, they're still very much serving low-income tenants. Last thing I want to talk, I do want to mention too that Florida has instituted its own preservation initiative where since 2005, we've had a set aside in our tax credit program specifically for preservation. And it's made a dent in what I was showing you before. They've preserved about 5,000 units. They've specifically focused on ones that serve the most low-income tenants, that have the highest levels of project-based rental assistance, either from HUD or from rural development. Most of those properties that have been preserved are either elderly or disabled properties, or through their programs have been able to add some units reserved for extremely low income and special needs households that didn't have it before. So we are, through policy, making a dent in those property losses and doing it in a way that targets those most deeply subsidized units that we know are not going to be affordable after they're lost. Then the last thing I want to talk about is our affordable housing suitability model. Let's just shift gears a little bit. And this focuses on location. So moving away from what's most at risk and what happens when things are lost to where do we want to see affordable housing. And it's another way of setting priorities both for preservation and for new construction to look for the sites and locations and neighborhoods that are most suitable for affordable housing. We've developed a GIS-based model where we look at physical characteristics of a site, and this goes down to the parcel level. Neighborhood socioeconomic characteristics, so is it in a mixed income neighborhood, higher income, lower income? How are the schools graded? What does the crime risk look like? Neighborhood accessibility, so is the neighborhood easily accessible to services and amenities? And then two transportation-related variables, the driving costs, so how accessible through driving, because a lot of people, including people in our assisted housing units, are driving to work, to shopping, to recreation. And then how transit accessible is the neighborhood? Is it near a transit stop? If so, does that transit stop take you to places people want to go, especially jobs? And what we do with our assisted housing inventory is we score every parcel in a region against the other parcels in its region, or compare it, say, to all the other multifamily housing in the region. Put those layers on top of each other and see where these different characteristics coincide. So where you have places that are, say, both transit accessible and in environmentally good locations and away from Superfund sites and with good infrastructure, and where these things may conflict and where you may have to make decisions. Planners who use this model can weight these characteristics differently and even weight the sub-characteristics within each one differently so they can get something that fits their needs. We've done the most development for Orange County, and just to give you an idea as to what this conflict can come up, transit accessibility in Orange County, generally the more, this is where Orlando is, generally the more centralized something is, or the more it's along a road corridor, the more accessible it is. So green is for the most accessible parcels, orange is for the least. If we look, however, at neighborhood socioeconomic diversity or higher income, lower poverty neighborhoods, the picture looks quite different, where a lot of the outlying areas, which are less transit accessible, have that higher socioeconomic status. And then what the model allows us to do is to find the places that have both, that are all of the above. So those areas in greens are both transit accessible and neighborhoods with good quality schools, low crime, lower poverty. And that gives us some idea to be able to prioritize where affordable housing development might look best. We're using this right now in two projects, two HUD Sustainable Communities regional planning projects, one in a 6 or 7 county rural area in South Florida, and one in the Orlando area, planning around the development of a commuter rail system. So in each case, what the suitability model allows us to do is find the areas that are most suitable for affordable housing according to the interests of that particular planning process, make changes to the assumptions of the model to see how the suitability changes, and help that regional, in this case regional planning effort, find the best places in the region for affordable housing. So that's another piece of information that we're using to start to think about and prioritize preservation. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Stacy.
Thank you, Anne. That was very interesting. We're going to travel from Florida to Chicago and Cook County for the Preservation Compact. The Preservation Compact is a collaboration of housing stakeholders in Cook County. Cook County is where Chicago is. The stakeholders are working together on a number of strategic programs and policies to preserve affordable rental housing in Cook County. And when I say affordable, I do mean both subsidized and unsubsidized housing. And we'll talk in a few minutes about the different initiatives we have going there. The Preservation Compact is housed out of the Community Investment Corporation. CIC is a nonprofit multifamily rehab lender. Most of the loans we do are in low and moderate income areas in the metropolitan Chicago area. Most go to smaller, privately owned, ma-and-pa type 5 to 49 unit kinds of buildings. As I said, mostly in low and moderate income areas. We've done $1 billion of financing in the past 30 years to finance 50,000 units of affordable rental housing. There are 39 lender investors for a $400 million pool. CIC also does property management training. You can imagine how important it is that these owners and managers have high capacity. It's not just for our borrowers, it's for any property manager or owner in the region. We also have innovative partnerships with the City of Chicago and others. The City of Chicago and CIC have a very interesting program called the Troubled Buildings Initiative, which focuses on preserving rental buildings that are troubled in some of our more challenging neighborhoods. The Preservation Compact launched in 2007 with the support of the MacArthur Foundation. In 2007, of course, the height of the housing boom, to stem the loss of affordable rental. I'll talk more in a minute about what we're doing in Cook County, but a couple of years after the Preservation Compact launched, MacArthur they took their show on the road nationwide and funded 12 different efforts for state and local initiatives around preserving affordable rental, many of those elements similar to what the Preservation Compact is doing. Now, the burning question I know most of you are going to have here is, what's a compact? So if you're really thinking now, these could all potentially be compacts, but we are indeed talking about a historic agreement. The Mayflower Agreement is one example, the compact, Mayflower, okay. So, the Preservation Compact and the interagency work. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about Preservation Compact initiatives and then spend more time talking about this interagency initiative that we have where we really focus on subsidized housing and talk about how we set it up, what the structure is, how it works, and what we think about when we look back at what we've done and what we're thinking about as we move forward. So the compact was created in 2007, as I said, subsidized and subsidized. In 2005 or so, the MacArthur Foundation convened a broad group of stakeholders, CDCs, owners, government, lenders, policymakers, to figure out why we were losing affordable rental housing and what could be done about it. The group came up with a number of reasons why the stock was disappearing. For instance, we need more information. So what Anne was saying, this is key, right? We need to make strategic decisions, think about our activities in a strategic way. We need information, data, and analysis. So the MacArthur Foundation funded the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University, and we work a lot with them, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Another reason we lose stock, operating costs are too high. Energy costs keep going up. So we created an energy retrofit program for multifamily rental. And since, in the last 4 years, we've done 35,000 audits. So 35,000 units have been audited through that program. 12,000 units have been retrofitted through that program. A very powerful and effective program. Property tax is another important operating cost. In Cook County, I don't know if this is true in other counties, property tax is very unpredictable, very confusing. We're trying to make sure that owners know that you need to appeal your taxes. It makes a big difference in Cook County. We're also working with the assessor's office to make sure that they are assessing multifamily rental in a fair and consistent way. 2 to 4 unit buildings. We realized a couple of years ago, we took a step back and said this economic environment is different. We've been ignoring this stock. It used to take care of itself. We realized that 2 to 4 unit buildings, 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats, 30% of the rental stock in Cook County. We'd only been paying attention to these 5 and up multifamily buildings. It so happens that those buildings, those 2 to 4 unit buildings, are located in some of the areas that were hit hardest by foreclosure. So those buildings are really dragging down neighborhoods. And one of the problems is our financing system is not set up for investors buying groups of those buildings. So we're looking at financing tools to make some impact in geographically small areas to help good, responsible investors purchase groups of these buildings. Tenants also need to be in the loop. They need to get information from government and from owners about what's happening to their buildings in terms of program and policy, and we need to be getting information from them. They know what's happening in their buildings. We're only looking at data on a screen. And of course, interagency coordination on government-assisted buildings. So the challenges, this may be obvious to some of you. Why do we need coordination? Well, we know public agencies can't do it alone. So there's the HUD layer, there's the state layer, the county layer, the city layer. They talk to each other the day of the crisis. But before the crisis hits, we need to be looking at early, as Ann was talking about, early intervention. How do we identify these properties before the crisis hits? And that's where the Preservation Compact Interagency Council comes in. And again, this is the only initiative where we focus exclusively on subsidized housing. So who's part of the interagency group? HUD, our state housing finance agency, the Illinois Housing Development Authority, the City of Chicago's Housing and Economic Development Department, and Cook County Economic Development, Bureau of Economic Development. And what do we do aside from bringing public agencies together to chat? We're using the data to keep us focused and strategic, to make sure that we're not wasting our time, that we're spending our time talking about properties that matter. We make sure that we're engaged with tenant groups, and we make sure that we're leveraging existing resources and programs. So that property tax and energy initiative, obviously, these are tools that we can use, and we're leveraging every partnership we have. We know most of the preservation players in the county. The interagency structure, there's a director level. In the early years, we spent a lot of time with these folks to make sure that they are on board with this idea of the Interagency Council. We don't meet with them as much anymore. We get a lot of guidance from them. We get direction from them. We make sure that they have buy-in. We make sure that they're telling their staff this is a priority. We don't meet with them as much. Now we have a monthly working group with staff. This is where all the action happens. The staff meets monthly, and I'll talk more in detail about that in a minute. But the other thing we do is try to provide resources to owners. And a lot of the time, this is information about new HUD policies and programs. It could be, the old green retrofit program, the new RAD program. And of course, we meet one-on-one with owners, especially if we see that there might be issues with their properties. So what's our process to identify properties? Ann just talked about a lot of the same elements that I would have mentioned. We are focused on project-based Section 8 properties, not to say we aren't paying attention to expiring use tax credit properties, or even unsubsidized. Sometimes those sneak onto our list as well. We're looking at value, the project-based properties. Once you lose those contracts, you lose them forever. And so we prioritize those up front early. We start by looking at REAC scores, knowing that this is not the be-all and end-all, but it's one indicator. We pull out those low REAC scores first. Type of property, again, as Ann said, sometimes it's surprising. You think, well, gee, it's a tenant-owned building. It's a co-op. Why would they ever want to opt out and convert to condo? And it's shocking. We actually have a special policy initiative now around government-assisted co-ops because some of them are kind of a disaster. We, of course, look at contract expiration, what market the properties are in, and of course, as I said, checking in with the tenant groups because they see things that we can never see. They're our eyes on the street. So what's our process to intervene here? This is kind of easy, basic stuff. Occasionally we get into something big where we've got several strategy meetings about one particular property, but for the most part this is pretty straightforward stuff. We know that HUD project managers are swamped. So a lot of this is just raising up these properties so the project manager is paying attention. So they're calling the owner or manager. Maybe I sit down with the owner and manager with the HUD project manager. Perhaps the property owner or manager is genuinely unaware of what the problem is, and they can solve it. Maybe they aren't aware of a program or resource or policy that can help them. And sometimes tenant engagement can push an owner to act where nothing else will, and that depends on the owner, the situation, the management company. And sometimes when a policy gets raised, we work on that policy. As I said, government-assisted co-ops is a good example where we saw a bunch of these coming up on our list and saying there's a bigger problem here. So we've been trying to strategize around a group of those in Cook County. We also worked a lot with our state weatherization agency when all that stimulus money came down a couple years ago, and as a result got 3,000 of our rental units weatherized in a program that's typically just for single family. Of course, to make sure we're not missing anything over time, we have an annual REAC roundup where we look at low REAC score properties to make sure that, again, the ones that are with bad conditions aren't going to slip through the cracks over time. And this last point is not exciting at all, monthly tracking and feedback, but actually everyone feels a little more pressured to get something done when you know you have to show up to a meeting and report on a property that's in your jurisdiction. So that actually, I think, actually moves things along for us in a way that if we weren't having monthly meetings, the properties wouldn't be making as much progress. So what works? I can't say enough about how wonderful our local HUD office is. Our multifamily office has been so committed, so supportive, and so responsive to this initiative. They are the key to success. Certainly you have to have all the agencies engaged, and as I said, at the director level, we have buy-in. They are interested in this, they're paying attention, and as a result, staff is. Snacks help a lot. Predictable snacks at the meeting. People have to make decisions about what to go to and not what to go to. They like the cookies that I provide. So looking into the future, we're looking at strengthening markets. We haven't thought about strong markets in a good long time. We need to dust off these old tools. We have to look and see if maybe some of them were working 6 years ago. I don't think a lot of them were. Maybe we can, take some of those lessons learned, fix our tools. We certainly need to be taking a second look at our list of properties and make sure that we're at least identifying those properties that are in strong markets. We also have the most boring initiative in the world, but this is actually important. We've been doing a lot of joint monitoring compliance work. So 2 years ago, the city, the state, and the county all had different tenant income certification forms. So if you were a manager or an owner and you had funding from the city and funding from the state, you had to fill out 2 different sets of tenant income certification forms, which is crazy. So now we have one uniform form. We also are doing an experiment with jointly scheduled file inspections on site. Again, a lot of duplicative process going on here for most of these buildings that do have jointly funded layers of funding. So this is good for both the managers and for sharing information across agencies. We're also working on lots of other uniform forms, and we're really excited the city of Chicago is looking at the state's multifamily application, not the process, we're still working on the process, but the application itself, so that the applications are going to be almost mirror images of each other. They're going to look very similar. It'll be easier for the owners to apply to both agencies, and again, it'll be apples to apples as the agencies work more together to compare information. And that's it, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Will.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you for not only for your great work, but your kind words about the Chicago field office. Glad it's working out. So I'm here to talk about the Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD. It was authorized by Congress in 2012, and we are quick on the implementation now. RAD is not only a signature initiative of HUD, but as some of my colleagues who've been working in public housing for a long time say, it's probably the biggest thing to happen to public housing since its inception in 1937. So this is something certainly worth paying attention to in all locations. So RAD's purpose is it's a preservation tool for PHAs, public housing authorities, and owners of public housing, Section 8 Mod Rehab, the rent supplement, and the rental assistance payment program. So my presentation will focus on public housing, but I'll certainly touch on the other programs, which we call legacy programs. And the approach is simple. Move these projects to a long-term project-based Section 8 subsidy. The project-based Section 8 program has been around for 40 or so years. It has a strong record of success of creating a stable funding platform for projects to serve very low-income populations while remaining in good shape and having access, very importantly, to capital sources when they're in need of rehab. So just a quick update. So we've Congress authorized RAD in 2012. We've since published a notice, PIH Notice 2012-32, which sets out the rules, and we are actively working with projects as they convert their properties. I'll provide updates on where public housing, Mod Rehab, Rent Sup, and RAP are throughout the presentation. So some background. The public housing inventory, there's about 1,152,000 to 154,000 funded units across the country. They're owned and managed by over 3,100 housing authorities. So, of course, all of the big cities, but also much smaller cities and towns around the country. Estimated probably more than 20% of public housing is in rural areas, actually. A recent study of, and it's old. So it was originated in the New Deal in 1937, so most of public housing was built in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. So this is an aged stock. Partially as a result, a recent study shown that the public housing inventory has a capital backlog of nearly $26 billion, or over $23,000 per unit, which is very large in the compared to other forms of affordable housing. The public housing is funded differently from other forms of affordable housing. There's no such thing as a contract rent structure where an owner has an expectation of what they'll receive each year based on a rent. Instead, they collect rents from tenants who pay 30% of their income. They receive an operating subsidy that covers that by formula an estimate of their operating expenses, and they receive a capital fund grant, which is intended to for the housing authority to make repairs on the project as needed. However, the capital fund each year is funded at about, most recently, around $2 billion, and as I've noted, the capital backlog is at $26 billion. So there's no, and given the appropriations environment, there's no shorter or midterm expectation that Congress will provide the capital funding that these projects are in need of. So partially as a result of all of these forces, over the past 15 years, on average, we lose anywhere from 8,000 to 15,000 units of public housing every year through demolition or disposition. The three technically other programs that RAD impacts are the Section 8 Mod Rehab program, which is a program that began in the 80s, and there's about 22,000 units left. The barrier there is, the barrier to preservation, I should say, is that Mod Rehab properties renew on one-year terms, and they were rehabbed in the 80s, and that's 30, 40 years ago now, 30 years ago now or so, and they're in need of additional repairs. But they, because of the one-year renewal terms, have a hard time accessing the capital markets, the debt and equity that they need to continue to be preserved as affordable housing. Then 2 additional programs, the Rent Supplement and the Rental Assistance Payment Program, what we call Rent Sup and RAP. There's about 17,000 units left there. These were contracts initiated in the 80s and then again in the 70s or so. Okay. They were long-term contracts, but when those contracts expire, they have no renewal option. And most of the properties are expected to expire within the next 4 or 5 years. So for all these properties, they're literally hitting a cliff where the subsidy will stop and the affordability of those projects will be lost. Okay, so again, I'm going to focus primarily on public housing in this presentation. But the key features in RAD that we've introduced to ensure that properties upon conversion are preserved are really in 2 categories. One I'll say in the contracts, and second in our underwriting of projects before they convert. So in the contracts, they're long-term Section 8 contracts, 20 years, which the rents of which increase by an operating cost adjustment factor each year. The contracts automatically renew. There's no opt-out option. And there's a long-term use agreement to make sure that the properties remain affordable. But before a project converts, what we require of any project is they have to show us a physical conditions assessment, and then they have to put together a financing plan that not only shows that they can raise, that they have commitments to raise the capital to address all of the project's immediate needs, but also that they can afford, that they're putting aside enough in a capital replacement reserve to ensure that for the next 20 years, these projects won't, again, accumulate a backlog of capital repairs and create a crisis for the next generation. There's, of course, much more complexity to RAD than these things, but I just wanted to highlight these as sort of the preservation features that we find very important. So here's a quick case study, and it's based on a real example. There's a 351-unit public housing project in Georgia. It's mostly a family project. It has estimated repairs, or actually the PCA shown repairs of over $6.5 million, or $18,000 a unit. Today, in the capital fund, the PHA receives just under $550,000 in total for this project. And so it would take, if the PHA did nothing for the next 12 years, it could accumulate enough capital funds and take care of $6.5 million in work. But of course, over that time, the property continues to age and things deteriorate. So that's not a viable option. So under the public housing program, the options are much more limited for this project. And so I'm going to walk us through what this would look like under RAD. And this is an extremely simple, straightforward example. I don't mean to say this is cookie cutter in any way, but I think it's just a nice example to walk through. So today, the project receives $824,000 through the operating fund to support operating subsidy. It collects $716,000 in rents. And as I said, it receives just under $548,000 from the capital fund. So in total, it's pulling in $2 million, which would come out to $500 per unit per month. Under RAD, we don't have an interesting feature of RAD. We don't have any money to give out. We're converting projects using existing funding available. So we're taking that $2 million and turning that into what they never had before, a contract rent, which in this case is $500 per unit per month. And many say, well, if you're not providing them more money, how does this work? How is this a preservation tool if there's not an additional HUD investment? So the question is, well, let's see, would $500 per unit per month solve the capital backlog for this project? Sorry, the numbers are a little small, but this is just and I'm a numbers guy, so I apologize. This may be less interesting for some. This is just an income and expense statement for the project. At $500 a month, it can collect $2.1 million. after making assumptions about vacancy and subtracting operating expenses and a capital replacement reserve, it has net operating income of $480,000. And this is exactly the process a lender would go through. A lender would say, show me, so what are your rents? What do you expect to receive in income? What do you expect your expenses to be? Show me data backing that up, historical or otherwise. And show me why I should trust that net operating income number of $480,000. If the owner, the PHA in this case, can prove that, the lender says, well, I will make a loan to you based on that amount. And so in this case, it can support first mortgage debt service of $364,000, which I'll show what that means in a second. So here's then a continuation of that, a quick sources and uses. So at today's really great FHA terms, though these are starting to rise at 3.5% and over 35 years, the project could support debt of a principal of $6.7 million, which is uncannily close to the needs of the project. There are some additional costs associated with taking out the FHA insured loan, as well as some of the planning involved in these repairs, paying an architect, et cetera. And so the Housing Authority is filling the gap with a couple of other sources from the Federal Home Loan Bank, as well as using the operating reserves that are currently already at this property to fill the gap, and they're making it work. I think the bottom of the screen is cut off, but the sources and uses balance in this case. There's $7.5 million in sources and $7.5 million in uses. And so this is a very simple case. They're simply taking out a loan, which is completely typical in affordable housing finance, promising to pay that loan over the next 35 years and taking care of its needs today. Meanwhile, I've shown it's putting aside a decent amount, a pretty nice amount, $568 a unit, for a capital replacement reserve to take care of the needs of the project, to make sure that the project's in good shape over the next 20 years. Again, very simple example. And you can see how this is just the initial analysis. Depending how the numbers work out, the capital needs might be much higher, in which case the Housing Authority will start to look at 4% tax credits, or if even higher, 9% tax credits, or other gap financing. And if lower, then this deal is a slam dunk. The project converts, moves to a more stable funding platform, and we have much more assurance that it's going to continue to be a part of the deeply affordable housing stock for the long term. Now, more numbers. To give a sense of the projects we're working with now, we received, let's see, in the initial round, 12,000 units. In the past month, we've gotten another 4,000 units, and that's just growing now. The demand for this program is picking up, and we fully expect to get to the 60,000 unit cap, which Congress imposed on this demonstration, possibly by the end of this year. But for those we've already that we're already working with and now processing their conversions for, many are doing new construction. More than a fifth of them are doing new construction. They're tearing down projects that potentially could be rehabbed, but they're so old and so outdated that it just makes more sense to tear them down, as long as they can put together the financing to replace those units. Many are using, of course, 9% tax credits, which are very competitive, but a surprising number are able to do this even with 4% tax credits, which are generally non-competitive in many states. And then the rest, the other 78% of the units we're working with now, are performing rehab, anywhere from substantial rehab over 50,000 a unit to pretty low amounts of rehab under 10,000 a unit. So this last slide tries to summarize the variety of things housing authorities are achieving. I showed so far only a very simple example, 351 units, rehab it and stabilize the property moving forward. But there's actually a ton of other things housing authorities can do under RAD. Okay, modernizing aging family and elderly properties. That was the basic example. Substantial rehab. That means they're bringing in 4%, 9% tax credits. It means they're engaging many other partners very significantly in the project. They are demolishing and replacing some severely distressed properties. What once was the realm of Hope 6, we're seeing some housing authorities pull off without that humongous additional capital grant from HUD. Not to say that it's universally replicable, but people are pulling it off, and it's really impressive, and it's really transforming some communities. There are thinning densities and mixing incomes. In some cases, that means you have the opposite of thinning densities. They're a site that is not dense enough, and they can add market rate units, and that helps to finance some of the repairs, or tax credit units that are at higher rents. And very importantly, which now or think much more seriously and creative about, is under RAD you can transfer assistance. This is something that's almost unprecedented in any HUD project-based program, where you can take assistance that's been at a site for decades and say, HUD, it doesn't make sense here anymore. It was built here in 1942, or it was handed to us as wartime housing when the Second World War ended, and it's not in a location that makes sense. It's not serving our residents well. It's also in very tough shape. Can we move it closer to the downtown area? Can we spread it out to 4 or 5 or 6 different properties around the community? So that it's not this the drain on the community that it's been, while making sure that the tenants are protected and that there's still one-for-one replacement. In the first few applications that we've received, there are a few cases of this, but the proposals we're starting to get in, and people are bouncing off of us, are getting more and more creative and really transformational. Just to conclude, we believe RAD is probably the most innovative tool available broadly to all public housing authorities to transform their public housing stock, to modernize it, and to achieve whatever local community objective they have for this deep rental assistance. It certainly doesn't mean it's easy. The numbers don't always work out. $500 per unit per month doesn't mean you can do anything you want. That's obviously a constraint, but for the first time, these properties are treated and have the access to the resources and expertise of the full real estate industry. The partnerships that they're forming in their communities with nonprofits, with other public agencies, with for-profit developers is groundbreaking. And so we're extremely excited to see how this program evolves moving forward.
Thank you so much, Will, and thanks so much to all of our panelists. And what I'd like to do now is open things up for question and answer session, and I have a few questions to kick us off, but folks here, feel free to come up to the microphone, and I know folks who are watching outside of this space can also email in questions, and we'd be happy to take those. But just to sort of kick us off on the topic of public housing, sort of pivoting from Will's presentation, since we're discussing public housing preservation, I'm wondering for both Ann and Stacy, you talked a little bit about incorporating public housing housing, but I'm wondering, do you see the models that you are using as being able to bridge the divide and bring in public housing? And what do you think some of the opportunities are for that and some of the challenges for that, to incorporate public housing in your strategies?
Sure. Well, I mean, because of our partnership with our state housing finance agency, and because they've turned to look at public housing more, we've really started to look at it more too. One of the challenges we face with that is it's a little harder to get data on our public housing stock. There's such a history of having that data in the multifamily programs, and so getting that same information on the public housing programs would be a big help. We do a rental market study for our state every 3 years. That's really a needs assessment of the affordable rental housing needs in Florida's counties and for different special needs groups. And we look at our housing supply. And we do it every 3 years, so 2013 is part of that cycle. And for the first time this year, we were specifically asked to look at Florida's public housing stock. We looked at the age of the properties, and our stock's a little bit newer, I think, just because Florida's a little bit newer. A lot of it's built in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. We have had a lot of Hope 6 redevelopment. Knowing the tenant characteristics, where a typical income in these properties is $10,000 a year or less, has been really helpful. And the state is responding, and the state has taken the lead by specifically setting aside 9% tax credit for public housing revitalization. In fact, they have an RFP out right now looking for revitalization projects from PHAs in smaller and medium-sized counties. So we're starting to get more information about it, and they're definitely kicking in resources and working. There's a nice partnership, I think, between the PHAs and Florida Housing.
So when the Preservation Compact started, the Chicago Housing Authority had a really big plan. There are lots of cooks in that kitchen, and we said, we got enough to deal with here with our assisted housing stock. Let's leave the public housing on its own. That being said, recently the Chicago Housing Authority and the Housing Authority of Cook County have done some very interesting things with their project-based vouchers. And so this has become an opportunity to preserve not just the unsubsidized stock, because unsubsidized rental buildings that need help. And project-based vouchers are certainly one way to get to where you need to go. The Chicago Housing Authority has also been entertaining some interesting ideas and proposals. A lot of our tenant-based groups have been very creative and very thoughtful about, for instance, when we're able to trigger new vouchers from HUD for a maturing 236 that's going to prepay their mortgage, talking to the Housing Authority about project-basing some of those. And we don't have a hard and fast program right now. We're still talking about it. But certainly this is a resource that we're really interested in. It's a huge opportunity, and we're talking to them more and more.
That's great. And Stacy, in particular, you talked about all the different players that you have at the table. And I heard a couple things. One is I heard all the different agencies, the federal, state, county and city agencies at the table, and of course there are different agencies. It's not just, it's the various agencies at the city and county level. Also tenant groups, advocacy groups. And you talked a lot about creating sort of a shared strategy, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what goes on in that room. I mean, I just imagine the competing interests that folks have. For example, we at HUD know which properties have our subsidies on them. So of course we have a vested interest in those, and the state has an interest in those. So how do you bridge that to kind of create a shared strategy?
So we've decided, that we are going to focus on project-based Section 8 properties. And the city and the state recognize the value of those properties too. And so when they think about preservation, they're thinking about those same properties. So we're not necessarily, they're not begging to get their tax credit properties on the table. If they did, we'd be happy to entertain those. The other thing is a lot of the project-based Section 8 also has resources, perhaps from the state or the city. So those actual workouts occur outside the room. We're talking about how are we prioritizing, how are we listing our properties, and then sort of giving other people marching orders to take care of stuff outside the room. So we're not in those conversations necessarily. Certainly there are potential tensions having the tenants in the same room as the agencies. But really, over the years, we've built up trust. And, we know that what we're talking about in the room isn't going to leave the room. That helps a lot. We don't sing Kumbaya or anything like that. But it has, over the years, you can imagine that we've become sort of a, more of a tight-knit group. So we've managed to navigate some of that.
And Anne, any tales from the trenches from where you sit in terms of folks' competing interests?
Well, I think the big one actually is just competition for a really limited pool of resources and the tension between new construction and preservation. And, in a volatile market like Florida's, you'll hear from the state legislature, for instance, why are we doing any new construction at all? Why are we building anything given vacancies? With some of the tighter rental markets that came up in the first presentation, that focus, I think, is starting to shift some. So I think the tension between new development and preservation is a big one. There's really only so many resources to go around, and that's not behind closed doors. That is playing out very publicly, and to some extent is political.
Mm-hmm. And you shared with us the locational focus of some of your work, which was really interesting to think about the different priorities that go into deciding where to site new construction. And I'm wondering if folks are starting to use that for preservation as well. And I just noted that, Will also mentioned in terms of transferring assistance, that sort of locational aspect. But for all of you, really, what do you think the opportunities are to think spatially and sort of locational and amenities and things like that for preservation?
Well, I think, the model, we've absolutely thought about preservation all along in doing it. We've put the existing, if I could I won't put the maps up again, but we've actually put the existing properties on those maps. You see some real differences, and a lot of those have to do with time, where you have the older properties with HUD rental assistance or those last HUD mortgages that are quite centrally located. You have, for the more recent tax credit properties, you have a mix of urban and suburban properties. To mention one example where the model is being used, the Sunrail Sustainable Communities Project. So that's a multi-county region focused around Orlando where a new commuter rail line is coming in on an existing freight line. And so a lot of changes are going to be happening. So what looks transit accessible now is going to be different, both because there's going to be this new rail stations and also because the bus system is going to be reconfigured to serve those new rail stations. And so what the model allows you to do is find the existing subsidized, and we're working on trying to identify unsubsidized affordable rental housing along those lines to make sure that to the extent we're preserving housing, we're doing it in places that those new bus lines allow you to get to jobs, to the extent there's transit-oriented development and there's already existing affordable housing within those areas, that housing doesn't disappear. So we're not only looking at conditions as they are right now, but how they're going to change as the sustainable development planning process goes on, and we're able to identify the affordable housing within each buffer around these sites.
And Stacy, have you all looked at sort of the spatial or location aspect of your preservation priorities, and do you think that that's something that could work for you all?
So we consider Chicago just to be transit-oriented development. The state of Florida is obviously much different, and the far-flung suburban areas are much different. We are looking more at probably market strength. So for instance, when a strong suburban market, a property comes up, there is a mobile home park, unsubsidized, in a really strong market in the suburbs that doesn't have any other subsidized housing practically. And so we were like, oh, what can we do for that? And so we look probably more at markets rather than transit, just because our metro area it's very accessible already.
Great. Will, anything you wanted to add?
So when I've spoken with housing authorities about this, they're often very intrigued. It opens up a new world for them, and they often think on two tracks. One is, okay, that's great. I don't like it doesn't make sense where it is, and there are opportunities to put it in neighborhoods of greater opportunity. And the other side is, I've got another project without deep rental assistance, might be a tax credit project that's struggling, and putting a Section 8 contract would really help to shore it up. And so there's I think both, of course, are good ideas, but there's a little bit of tension there, right? Just like you demonstrated that there's a tension between transit-oriented development and socioeconomic diversity and things like that. So.
And since you get at things like socioeconomic diversity and other opportunities, of course we know that both construction of affordable housing as well as preservation of affordable housing can also be tied to some other very critical benefits for communities, such as economic opportunities, improvements to neighborhoods. So I'm curious if you all have seen examples of this, of actually preservation work sort of tying into some of those other benefits for residents.
So one thing that we've really latched onto in Chicago is in those weak market areas, there's a whole lot of affordable rental housing. Unfortunately, those same areas were hit very hard by the foreclosure crisis. And so what we've been talking about is community development, almost in service to preserving affordable rental. How do you build a market? How do you attract demand in these areas that just don't have a lot of amenities, and again, in fact, are a losing population. So it's not the weakest of the weak markets, but there's markets that could make it that are sort of on the edge, on the cusp, and we're gonna lose a lot of affordable rental because there just isn't demand. So how can we build community development strategies in order to preserve those? And again, I'm talking largely about unsubsidized rental, but that's a lot of where that unsubsidized rental is in these weak markets.
Absolutely. And Will, I know that for RAD, a lot of folks are incorporating RAD with other benefits for residents, services. Any thoughts on that? Anything that you're seeing that you think is interesting there?
So yeah, on the first front, on the economic development front, one of the things we're very proud of is that Section 3, which requires that a certain amount of the employment opportunities that arise from construction go to low-income families. All of the repairs under RAD, the initial repairs, are subject to Section 3. So we estimate just in the initial tranche of properties where they're doing $500 million worth of work, that's going to create 10,000 jobs, many of which will go to the families who are also residing there, or other low-income families in the neighborhood. Also, more and more as housing authorities are getting more comfortable with RAD, they're thinking not just about one or two properties, sort of getting their feet wet, but thinking about a greater portion of their portfolio. And obviously, we know that in some neighborhoods there's a density of public housing and assisted housing. And so to the extent that there's substantial work going on in a large campus of assisted affordable housing, the economic effects, I think it'll be exciting to see, but it's too early to tell right now.
That's right. It's a nice laboratory for us to look at. Stacy, you mentioned something in your presentation about the high operating costs of a lot of these older properties. And of course, one of the things that you mentioned as one of the potential solutions for that is energy efficiency, which is something that the department is very interested in. And in fact, we have a number of, just to plug some of our programs, initiatives that we're working on, including the Energy Innovation Fund, which is really exploring new ways to incorporate new financing models for energy efficiency improvements in multifamily properties, as well as things like the Green Retrofit Program and the Mark-to-Market Green Initiative. Of course, on the public housing side, we have the Energy Performance Contract model as well. So are you seeing a lot of multifamily property owners showing an openness to energy efficiency? Are you seeing more of that? And what's the update from the ground on what folks are doing on energy?
So a very interesting question. We're actually having a conference in July, and one of the questions we're asking is how to bring more owners in the door. So we've already seen 12,000 units that have been retrofitted through this program. So here's the interesting thing. So 35,000 units have been audited. So this is, the Center for Neighborhood Technology, CNT Energy, walks through and they say, all right, here's what you can do. And here's what the payback schedule is. So if you have to invest this, it'll pay itself back in 5 years based on the savings on your energy bills, which is a wonderful thing. So they walk through that. These are typically $3,000 per unit. These are tiny little things. We're not talking about windmills and green roofs. This is really basic, ceiling, pipe insulation, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a no-brainer. The payback times are pretty short. So once the owner walks in the door, again, 35,000 units have been audited, 12,000 have actually been retrofitted. Of those 12,000, we've got low-cost financing for this at CIC. Only 3,000 of those have actually come to us for financing. The information is powerful. The owners are self-financing. They're either doing it out of their pockets, they're going to the lenders. But our question is, we're delighted that we did 12,000 units. This is great. You know, these units have been retrofitted, but guess what? There's 500,000 rental units in Cook County that could be retrofitted that are affordable. And so we're trying to figure out the owners they're not interested in being green and healthy. They are interested in their bottom line. And so, you know, how do you bring them in the door?
Some are. Just there's a few. There's some.
But we're having a lot of discussions with owners about how to bring them in the door, because there's a lot of programs out there. It's confusing. When you say green, they assume you mean green roofs and geothermal. There's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, these are just sort of like quick, easy. This is going to save 30%. They're saving 30% on their energy bills. So we're trying to figure out how to bring them in the door. We've been successful, but this is a great program. More people should be participating.
Great to hear. Any other thoughts, Anne or Will, on energy efficiency? Anything that you're seeing or hearing in your work?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. So I think in Florida have a very different situation where in our multifamily stock, typically the utilities are tenant paid. And so we deal with the split incentive problem, where how do you get owners to make investments in energy efficiency when it's the tenants who get the financial benefit? Conversely, how do you in the properties where the owners do pay the utility bills, which is fairly rare, how do you get tenants to conserve energy? So I think in our community, the incentive is really the public programs. So in Orlando, for instance, the utility company there worked with a sister center of ours at University of Florida that works in energy efficiency to retrofit half the units in 5 multifamily buildings, some subsidized, some not. And now they're measuring the energy savings from those retrofits. It took some incentives from the utility. It took some ARA money that was coming through our state energy office. From what we've heard, at least anecdotally, the owners are delighted because the tenants are really happy with it. In fact, they want to go retrofit the other half of the units. We're saying, no, wait, we have to evaluate what happened to the ones we didn't retrofit. And so I think it's going to take that outside involvement to bust that split incentive problem, to have financing available, to have the utilities get involved. And so the utility company in Orlando is very interested in this because something like half their customers are in multifamily units. And in competitive processes, so in our tax credit allocation process, there are points for energy efficiency, and people are going after those points. So, whether somehow there needs to be a money incentive coming in order to make this happen. And where that money is coming, it is happening.
That's great, thank you. And then, Will, I know in the RAD program, of course, we have an energy efficiency component with the RPCA. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, virtually, it's interesting what you mentioned about Florida. Virtually every case where a project is proposing to use 9% tax credits or getting 9% tax credits, they're achieving a very high level of efficiency and going after a green certification of one form or another. It's universal across the board. So that seems to have really seeped across the states, or at least the ones that are participating in RAD. I mentioned earlier that every project has to go through a PCA. We identify the needs, and they have to address those needs with financing. The PCA that we use not only identifies, well, what's broken and what needs to be replaced, but then provides options for the housing authority to say, well, this is what it would cost to replace as is, and here's the estimated impact on utilities moving forward. Here's replacing at a higher level, more modern level, and the effect on utilities. And here's a third option of going even greener, and assesses for you what the payback is, if it's 3 years, if it's 25 years, and makes a recommendation. So the physical conditions assessment, like any other PCA, is a planning tool. It doesn't tell you what you're going to do. the housing authority a really good sense of what their options are and helps them think through the different possibilities. And so a lot of housing authorities are saying that it's a little bit more than they're used to in some of the physical needs assessments that they've used in the past, but it's helpful in their planning process.
And I'm sorry, I have to pose a challenge to HUD actually on this. So we, in the 12,000 units that have been retrofitted, these are typically mid-sized, small, unsubsidized buildings, is again, a lot of our stuff. And the ones that are able to and that they can take second mortgages if they're going to get some low-cost financing from us. It's just a regular second-home mortgage. And of course, FHA and Fannie and Freddie typically don't allow a second mortgage behind their liens. And so, for a property to try to finance a second loan to do energy efficiency is it's impossible if they have an FHA loan or Fannie and Freddie. On-bill financing is one way to get around this, and we actually just put together an on-bill financing law in Illinois that's going to allow multifamily to use it, and we're trying to put together a program design that's going to work well. That's going to help with that problem because it will be paid back. There won't be a lien. It will be paid back on your energy bill. But I will say, I think some of those larger subsidized buildings, they have to do a big rehab in order to incorporate the energy into that.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of what we see is folks that come in and do the whole scale recapitalization. So they're taking out a whole, for example, a 221D4 substantial rehab loan, and they're incorporating the energy work in there. Of course, we do allow secondary mortgages on a case-by-case basis in certain circumstances, but it is limited, and it's typically soft debt. So it's a little bit different scenario. So we hear the challenge. We'll take it under advisement.
Thanks, Margaret.
And no promises there, but we'll definitely take that challenge noted. One of the things that I wanted to ask you that we hear a lot is about ownership and owner capacity. So, and particularly, Anne, when you were describing the lost property inventory, I mean, to me, that's really groundbreaking information to have, to see what's actually happening to these properties and, how many of them are actually maintained as affordable. And it sort of begs the question about, if they're not changing hands, was the owner just had a lack of capacity, lack of interest in this? And then, Stacy, you also talked about this too, about not just the for-profits, but the nonprofits. So one of the things I hear all the time is there are committed nonprofit organizations that want to purchase these properties and would love to be able to do that and would love to preserve them. Now, it's a very small group of people that say that to me, but they are very committed. And my question, I guess, to you from your experience, both of you, is, do you get the sense that there's something more that HUD could do to help identify those purchasers, empower them, link them up with these owners who maybe want to exit the affordable housing world? Do you have any kind of advice for us on that?
So my experience is varied, right? So we've got some very strong capacity in Chicago and Cook County already, and that's wonderful, and we're delighted about that. And there's also, there's little guys that are trying to do things, and they don't necessarily have the capacity. In fact, one of the CDFIs in town has I forget what they call it, but informally they call it the scared straight for potential CDCs, because it's really hard work. And so I would say, I don't want to sound limiting and exclusive. However, I think a lot of these smaller groups get in over their heads. And we've encouraged that in some ways over the years. And again, in some cases, it works out wonderfully that you're building capacity and they're able to do it. And in other cases, it doesn't, and you're contributing to the problem. So I would just say, sort of tread lightly and carefully and try to strike a balance there.
Absolutely. Great, thank you. I think we had a question here.
Hey, so thanks for everybody's fantastic presentations. I'm Todd Richardson from the Office of Policy Development and Research. One thing I noted in Anne's presentation, you had that nice chart, not so nice chart, about lost inventory in Florida, and you have this spike in 2012, right? It's a really big number there that's pretty high. Is your sense that that sort of just built up because folks weren't exiting during the sort of the down cycle the recent down cycle, or do you expect that that's sort of the new norm and we're going to see over 2013 and 14 a lot more exits from the inventory?
Well, I mean, the number really surprised me when we put this together recently, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But I think we've learned a couple things. One is that most of these are not the traditional way I think of opt-outs, where somebody is converting a property to market rate housing. So I mean, it's been a while since we've really seen much of that going on. So in looking at those 2012 numbers, what that spike is, a lot of properties that were financed with mortgage revenue bonds, they're paying them off. So we may just have had a cycle where a lot of those are maturing or refinancing. And based on our research about affordability, it's the ones that don't have other subsidy layers that are keeping the rents lower, it's probably okay to let them go. I mean, they're going to be affordable about the same rates they were before because they weren't that deeply subsidized. The other thing we saw, though, is these expiration of Section 236 projects, of some Section 515 RD projects. We did see an unusual spike of those. Now again, that might be, we're just hitting year 40 for those very last ones from those programs from the early 70s. And what that shows me is we need to be thinking hard about a mechanism to save those, to keep those in the program, that we may not have now. We've been very focused on the project-based Section 8, and we should continue to be. The other way we lose properties is through deterioration. Again, we're not seeing a lot of market rate opt-outs, but every year we do see some properties that fail out of the inventory somehow. Either HUD abates the contracts, which happened, there were several of them in the past couple of years, or the owner decides that they just can't keep it going anymore. And by the time we get to those, it's way too late. You know, there's one in our area, for instance, which looking at location would have been off the charts on ours. You know, on a bus route between retail and the two major employers in town, the university and hospital, very mixed income neighborhood, down the street from a wonderful elementary school, in such poor condition by the time people were talking about it, that people were glad to leave with vouchers, and who can blame them, really? So I think, you know, when Stacy was talking about keeping an eye on REAC scores, I love the idea of an annual REAC roundup, and really getting ahead of things. It's going to take a few years to get to where we can preserve those. So I think, you know, some of this year's spike might be an anomaly in timing, and we'll definitely take a look and see if there are other ones coming right behind that. And some of them might be things that it's kind of okay to let go in this market.
Please, I think we have time for a couple more questions, but certainly if anyone else here in the audience or over email wants to submit anything. Todd, take it away.
Okay, Stacey, so I know a lot of folks here are multifamily folks, but the 2 to 4, you talked about that being a big part of the market in Chicago, that you're concerned about preservation. So what are some of the tools you're using on the 2 to 4 market?
So our concerns, let's start with those, right? They're dragging down entire neighborhoods. They're kind of all over the place. There's a scattered site management concern, right? I mean, anyone who lives anywhere, it seems like when investors are buying, these people freak out. They don't want to see an investor-owned small building. And then there's kind of this issue of scattered improvement. So maybe, maybe there's a owner-occupant who buys here, an investor who buys one here, an investor who buys one there. You're not going to reach scale. You're not going to have impact. So when we're looking at challenges, as I said before, the financing world is split up into owner-occupied housing, which are 1 to 4s, and multifamily housing, which is 5+. And so the commercial lenders, they're happy to finance investors in 5+ housing all day long. On the 1 to 4 side, those guys are like, bring in your owner occupants, come on people. But if you have 3 2-flats that an investor is trying to buy, the commercial guys say, whoa, that is not a 6-flat, that's 3 2-flats. And these guys say, we don't finance investors. And so CIC is putting together a financing pool with I think 6 lenders, and we're hoping to affect 200 or so buildings potentially. And the idea is we're going to provide takeout financing So we're trying to get to investors that have some capacity to go out and get acquisition and rehab financing on their own. And then they can come to us once the buildings are stabilized, and we'll provide that takeout term financing. And again, one of our ideas is we're not going to finance something here, there. We're looking at tight geographies, and we're looking at a minimum of 9 units. Maybe that's 3 flats. But we're trying to achieve some scale and have some impact, only looking at areas where there's other targeted investment going on. Maybe the city's got making a lot of investments or focusing in some areas. Maybe there's a bank that's got a focus or a CDC that's got a focus, but we don't want to do this in a vacuum. And so we're really looking to maximize impact with this financing tool. It's kind of a pilot program. And luckily CIC knows what a good investor looks like. So we're looking for investors with strong track records to avoid this scattered site management quality problem that so many people have seen in other communities.
Another question from the audience?
Good afternoon. I have a question to Will in regards to RAD. And basically, I heard a lot about the whole notion of preservation, but what I don't hear is impact residents in public housing as it relates to, say, FSS services, raw services. Does RAD sort of eliminate those activities when a public housing authority converts?
Sure. So under the public housing program, there are of course a few programs available, including ROS and FSS, to facilitate services for residents. Converting properties, first of all, the tenants who are living there today after rehab have a right to return to those properties and can continue under the existing FSS program or ROS program that they're under. If there was an existing grant, ROS or FSS grant, they can continue under that for the duration of the grant. And if the project is converting, I didn't go into this level of detail, but there's 2 forms of project-based assistance they can convert to. If they move to project-based vouchers, there's an FSS program under the project-based voucher program. So they would continue to have that option moving forward to remain a beneficiary of FSS.
Any further questions, folks? Well, I think we're at time, so I'd love to just, if you all could join me in thanking today's panelists for your informative presentations.
I wanted to thank again our speakers today. Key takeaways are really important in terms of we got a great update in terms of what we're doing at the federal level in terms of streamlining loan products and issuing notices, and of course launching our signature program, the RAD program. And we also heard how powerful it is to have data and to have the inventory established, as well as suitability model from Anne, and of course from Stacy in terms of how critical it is to establish interagency structures to serve as a resource both in technical assistance and to really establish a body where key voices can be heard and can weigh in on important decisions. Our next briefing will be in October, and I hope everyone will join us again. Next time, we'll be hearing about aging in place issues, and we also are going to be working on a next Evidence Matters edition on that very topic. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great summer.